There was a time an 8-year-old girl named Tandiwe lived in a quiet village surrounded by golden fields and thick forests. She was known as Tandy for short. When her mother died suddenly, her father had no choice but to leave for the city to search for work. Tandy was left behind with her grandmother, Gogo Sibongile, until he could bring her to the city one day. Gogo was respected in the village because she was a skilled weaver. People traveled from near and far to buy the clothes she spun, twisted, and knotted with care. Aside from weaving, she cooked for the elderly, gathered firewood, and prepared herbs for those who sought her healing. But by nightfall, her hands ached and her tired eyes stared into the fire. The other children did not welcome Tandy. They whispered when she passed by, watching her with guarded expressions. Some said misfortune followed her family. Others believed it was bad luck to get too close. Every evening, she went to the river while others were resting by the cooking fires. She liked the way water moved. It was never still, never silent. The sounds made her feel less lonely. Sometimes, she would throw small stones into the water and watched them sink, disappearing beneath the surface as if they had never been there at all. As her usual routine, she went to the river one evening. She had barely sat in her favorite spot, a shiny stone, a baobab tree, when she heard her name. Then she heard it, a loud whisper. She turned toward the village but saw nothing. That's when she saw something strange. Tiny footprints appeared in the wet sand, pressing into the ground one by one, as if she's being approached by an invisible person. Then the boy emerged in front of her, and for the first time, she wasn't alone. He was barely taller than she was, but his complexion was deeper black than the night sky. His shape seemed to shift slightly whenever he moved, as if light could not touch him properly. His eyes were large, and it watched her closely. His mouth stretched just a little too far when he smiled. He asked her if she wanted to play. Tandy was happy, and so she played. Tandy had never known a friend like Ujambulo. He was smart and fast. He moved like the wind, never making a sound. Unjabulo knew games she had never seen before, like games with clapping of hands. Another game involved spinning in circles while their shadows stretched long and thin on the ground. Sometimes, when they played hide and seek, she would run deep into the trees, pressing herself into spaces too small for most to fit. She held her breath, listening, waiting. But no matter where she hid, Unjabulo always found her. She would hear soft tapping sounds at her window at night. When the house was silent, a light tap, 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 as if small fingers brushed against the glass. He would be waiting whenever she joined him outside at any point at night. He smiled wide in the moonlight. One day, Tandy's teacher scolded her in class for not paying attention. The next morning, the teacher did not come to school. People whispered that she had woken up shaking, unable to explain the nightmare that she had through the night. A boy at school teased her, pulling at her dress. The next morning, his mother struggled to untangle the knots in his hair. They were twisted too tightly, as if someone had pulled at them all night. A woman in the market gave Tandy a sharp look as she passed by. The next morning, her goat was found dead. Tandy didn't want to believe it had anything to do with Unjabulo, but when she started staying away from him, she woke up to find her blankets pulled from her bed, as if something unseen had been watching her in the dark. Then the dreams started, and they were not dreams at all. Unjambulo's face was different in Tandy's dreams. His eyes stretched wider, his mouth was bigger, and his teeth were sharper than they were in reality. When she woke to use the bathroom one night, she saw him standing by her bed. watching, with his body moving like a fluttering wind. Tandy was so afraid that she peed in her bed. She could not move or breathe properly. Gogo Sibongile had lived long enough to notice when something was wrong in her house. She noticed that Tandy had become quieter. She saw the way the girl's shoulder tensed when she thought no one was watching. One evening, Gogo asked Tandy to sit with her by the fading cooking fire. She asked Tandy about everything, like the games she played and how she sometimes spoke when no one else was around. Tandy thought about how to respond to Gogo's last question. Then, she told her grandmother everything. Gogo did not speak right away. She listened. After Tandy recounted everything that had happened with her new friend, Gogo stood and left the house. She went right to Sangoma. The village healer listened to Gogo's story and instantly knew what was happening. It was not a boy who had found Tandy. It was something else. A tokoloshe. A mischievous spirit of mischief summoned by someone was upset, unhappy and lonely. The tokoloshe whispered in the ears of lonely people, offering them friendship in exchange for something unseen. Someone had called it here, and Gogo knew who it was. It was Gogo's sister, Nomusa, whom she had not spoken to in years. Long ago, before Tandy was born, Nomusa had been close with Tandy's mother. However, something had happened and it broke their friendship. While both women did not disclose what had destroyed their friendship, most people believed it must be related to Nomusa visiting a healer of a different kind, one who did not call on the ancestors, but on something else. And now, Akos seemed to have found Tandy in a way. Gogo cleaned every inch of the house the next night. Gogo spread herbs across the doorway, burnt sacred wood in the fire, and carried Tandy close to the flames. Then, she whispered sacred prayers. Several sounds filled the air, with the most common one being laughter. The sound was sharp and cold, ringing through the air like a living thing. Tandy's body lifted from the mat where she lay. Her arms twitched, her fingers curled, and her breath came in slow gasps. When she opened her mouth, her voice was not her own. The tokoloshe did not want to leave. Gogo did not stop chanting. She cast the last of the herbs into the fire, calling upon the ancestors. The flames rose, and then a scream. Everywhere fell silent, and Tandy collapsed onto the floor. In the morning, she did not remember Unjabulo. She did not remember the games or the whispers. She was safe. But when Gogo went out the next night, she saw something in the dirt. There were footprints trailing down the hill, disappearing into the thick grass. They trailed through the grass, past the trees, and down to the river. The tokoloshe had vanished. But has it really?